Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I offer an update on the case of Matthew Perry? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Matthew Langford Perry was born on August 19, 1969, in Williamstown, Massachusetts. His father, John, was an actor, and his mother, Suzanne, was a journalist. Matthew's parents divorced, and his mother married the famous Dateline NBC correspondent, Keith Morrison. Matthew was mostly raised in Ottawa, Canada. When he was 14, he started consuming alcohol and would struggle with substance use for his entire life. At the age of 15, Matthew moved to Los Angeles and lived with his father. After graduating from high school in 1987, he became an actor and landed a few parts in television shows, but his big break came in 1994 when he was cast as the character Chandler Bing on the television show Friends. The show featured 5 other main cast members: Jennifer Aniston, Courtney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, Matt LeBlanc, and David Schwimmer. They played the characters Rachel, Monica, Phoebe, Joey, and Ross, respectively. At 24 years old, Matthew was the youngest member of the main cast. The TV series Friends premiered in September 1994 and ran for 10 seasons. It became one of the most celebrated shows in television history. Matthew and his 5 co-stars were all propelled to staggering levels of fame and wealth. Not only did they earn millions of dollars when the show was on the air, they earned millions every year after the show ended due to syndication. In addition to Friends, Matthew had other acting jobs, but never recaptured the success of that show. Unfortunately for Matthew, even though the glory of Friends faded, his desire for substances was still getting high ratings. He consumed excessive quantities of alcohol and narcotics. Matthew attempted to stop using substances many times. He sought mental health counseling twice a week for 30 years. Attended 6,000 Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and went through detox 65 times. He almost died on several occasions, but he would not stop using drugs. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. To treat anxiety, Matthew received ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. Ketamine is a Schedule III controlled substance which is FDA approved for induction and maintenance of general anesthesia during surgical procedures. It is considered a dangerous drug and should only be used under the supervision of a medical professional. Unfortunately, Matthew's ketamine use extended far beyond these psychotherapy sessions to recreational use. On October 28, 2023, 54-year-old Matthew Perry was found unresponsive in his hot tub at his house in Los Angeles. About 2 months later, an autopsy revealed that he died from the acute effects of ketamine, as well as other contributing factors like coronary artery disease and drowning. The level of ketamine in his system was similar to what is observed during general anesthesia. In May 2024, the police started investigating how Matthew ended up with a lethal dose of ketamine in his system. Here is what they found during the course of their investigation. Matthew had a personal assistant named Kenneth Iwamasa. Kenneth had been working for Matthew since 1994 and lived in Matthew's house in Pacific Palisades. In September 2023, Kenneth talked to a physician named Salvador Plasencia about obtaining ketamine for Matthew Perry. On September 30, Salvador contacted another physician named Mark Chavez and asked about acquiring ketamine for Matthew. He discussed how much he should charge Matthew for the ketamine, writing, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay," unquote. Mark sent a photograph of ketamine obtained with a fraudulent prescription, which he was willing to sell to Salvador. That same day, Salvador made the purchase and supplied the ketamine to Matthew Perry. He injected Matthew with ketamine and left both ketamine and syringes with Kenneth for further administrations. On October 2, 2023, Kenneth sent Salvador a text message stating, quote, "Want to end up with 8 bottles of Dr. Pepper, not just 8 sessions," unquote. Dr. Pepper was code for ketamine. If the men were looking for a soft drink as a stand-in for a hazardous drug, Mountain Dew would have been a better fit. Maybe they were worried that particular code would be too easy to crack. Salvador sent a message to Mark stating, "If today goes well, we may have repeat business." After this, Salvador made his way to Matthew's residence, injected him with ketamine, and sold him additional ketamine. He sent Mark a message stating he needed more ketamine to sell Matthew. 2 days later, on October 4, Kenneth sent a text message to Salvador, which read, quote, "I will need to get more cans of Dr. Pepper from you today. I can come to you to make it convenient," unquote. On October 6, Salvador sold Kenneth more ketamine after Kenneth sent him a message saying he only had one left. The next day, October 7th, Kenneth sent Salvador messages looking for more ketamine. The men met just after midnight, now on October 8, and Kenneth purchased the drug. On October 10, Salvador injected Matthew with ketamine inside a vehicle in a public parking lot in Long Beach, California. He also sold Kenneth more ketamine. 2 days later, on October 12, Kenneth made another ketamine purchase. Matthew froze up and his blood pressure spiked after Kenneth injected him with the drug. Salvador told Kenneth something to the effect of, "Let's not do that again." Despite the scare, Salvador left more ketamine for Matthew. On October 13, 2023, Kenneth contacted a new supplier for ketamine, a drug dealer named Eric Fleming, who was an acquaintance of Matthew Perry. Eric, in turn, contacted a drug dealer named Jasveen Sangha, who was also known as the Ketamine Queen. After obtaining the ketamine from her, Eric supplied the drug to Kenneth. On October 24, Eric Fleming traveled to Matthew's house and delivered ketamine to Kenneth, who in turn injected Matthew at least 6 times that day. Kenneth would do the same thing on October 25, 26, and 27. So there were at least 24 injections over a 4-day period. On October 28, 2023, Kenneth injected Matthew Perry with ketamine at 8:30 a.m. and 12:45 p.m. At 1:25 p.m., just 40 minutes after the last injection, Matthew requested a 3rd dose of ketamine for that day. He told Kenneth, quote, "Shoot me up with a big one," unquote. Matthew was left unattended as Kenneth ran some errands. When Kenneth returned to Matthew's house, he found Matthew face down in the hot tub. The big one had been the life-ending one. Investigators concluded that the ketamine supplied by Jasveen is what caused Matthew's death. All 5 people involved in this tragedy were arrested and charged. Kenneth, Eric, and Mark were arrested first. 59-year-old Kenneth Iwamasa pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute ketamine causing death. He is facing up to 15 years in prison. 54-year-old Eric Fleming pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute ketamine and distribution of ketamine resulting in death. He is facing up to 25 years. 54-year-old Mark Chavez agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy to distribute ketamine. He could receive a prison term up to 10 years. On August 15, 2024, the remaining 2 conspirators were arrested. 42-year-old Salvador Plasencia was charged with conspiracy to distribute ketamine, 7 counts of distribution of ketamine, and 2 counts of altering or falsifying documents or records related to a federal investigation. He is facing up to 120 years in prison if convicted. 41-year-old Jasveen Sangha was charged with conspiracy to distribute ketamine, maintaining a drug-involved premises, possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine, possession with intent to distribute ketamine, and 5 counts of distribution of ketamine. If convicted, Jasveen is facing up to life in prison. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. In the weeks leading up to Matthew's death, Salvador was pretty excited about becoming partners with Mark in the ketamine business. He wanted to start a ketamine clinic with him. Mark responded to Salvador, writing that it was interesting, quote, "as long as we are doing things on the up and up, and we can start ASAP," unquote. He also said, quote, "all done legally without any shady stuff," unquote. Salvador responded, quote, "Oh, you don't agree with the method I am currently doing?" unquote. Mark stated, quote, "It's not what I think. It's what an entity like the California Medical Board would view it, or the DEA," unquote. It's clear that these two physicians knew what they were doing was illegal. They probably thought they could get away with it forever, as long as they were careful. Item number 2. The vials of ketamine that were sold to Matthew cost about $12 each, yet he paid much more to the drug dealers. The physicians sold Matthew 20 vials for $55,000. Jasvine and Eric sold Matthew 50 vials for $11,000. So the physicians were a lot more expensive than the street dealers. Salvador referred to Matthew as a moron in one of his text messages, wondering how much he would pay for the ketamine. Even though Matthew paid $66,000 in total for the ketamine, he could have afforded to pay much more. At the time he died, Matthew's net worth was $120 million. He was paying $49,000 a month just to rent the house in Pacific Palisades. This case illustrates how no one is immune from competition, even in the world of drug dealing. The street dealers used competitive pricing to close in on the physician's territory. This was concerning for Salvador. He wrote text messages to Mark explaining how he was worried Matthew might look somewhere else for the ketamine. He wrote, quote, "I think we would be best served not having him look elsewhere," unquote. Salvador wanted to be Matthew's go-to source for the drug. Instead of being worried about Matthew's well-being, Salvador was worried about extracting as much money from Matthew as possible. Item number 3. Not long after Matthew died, Jasvine contacted Eric and told him to delete all their messages. On October 30, 2023, 2 days after Matthew's death, Eric sent a text message to Jasvine indicating that she should call him, and he was 90% sure everyone was protected. He said he never dealt with Matthew Perry, only his assistant, so the assistant was the enabler. There's something particularly bizarre and disturbing about a street-level drug dealer calling anyone an enabler. Maybe it was a compliment. After all, enablers are critical to drug dealers having job security. Item number 4. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Matthew spent most of his life fighting his addiction. He burned through a lot of money chasing drugs and trying to escape them. He almost died several times from his substance use, so he clearly understood the risks of his behavior. At some level, he simply stopped caring. The drugs became Matthew's entire world. One time when he was talking about ketamine, Matthew said using the drug was like being hit in the head with a giant happy shovel. The problem for him was with the hangover. He described it as rough and said it outweighed the shovel. When Matthew made this statement, he was talking about the ketamine therapy, which was monitored by a professional and, of course, legal. He realized that by purchasing the drug illegally, he could sidestep the restrictions of ketamine therapy. Maybe he thought he could postpone the hangover indefinitely by using the drug every day, thereby leaving him with just his giant happy shovel. His wealth afforded him the opportunity to test this theory. The drug dealers in this case did not care about Matthew Perry. They simply saw an opportunity to make money. One customer like Matthew, who had seemingly unlimited resources, could be life-changing for a drug dealer. They look around and see everyone else making easy money in Hollywood and think, why not me? I deserve a piece of the pie as well. If Matthew doesn't buy from me, he will buy from somewhere else. Using this reasoning, they turn to Matthew and say, I'll be there for you. The surprising part is how the physicians involve themselves in selling ketamine. They don't need to do anything illegal to make good money. As far as Kenneth, Matthew's assistant, I think he is the only one who could make a good argument for leniency. I don't think he meant to contribute to his boss's death. He may not have understood how dangerous the ketamine was. After all, he was buying some of it from a physician. Even so, just like all the others, Kenneth knew what he was doing was illegal. No one here is without blame. The lesson in this case is how having wealth allows a person to engage in pleasurable activities. More wealth means more engagement. If the pleasurable activity happens to be using substances, then extraordinary wealth will greatly speed up one's demise. Those are my thoughts in the case of Matthew Perry. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comments section. They consistently generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.